Awesome. Thanks for sticking with us there. We were having a little bit of difficulty setting up the stream, but it should be good to go now. Um, just a little bit of housekeeping before we kick things off. We do have like a live chat right next to the stream here. And so if you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to post them in that live chat window. And we have two of us right here, right now. So anything you post in there, we should have someone that's just monitoring that chat that can take a look at that and relay those questions to whoever is speaking. And so with that out of the way, let's kick things off. As is tradition, we just want to introduce ourselves real quick. If this was a normal semester, we'd all get up and kind of let you see our faces, put a face to a name here. But due to this ongoing pandemic, we're going to have to do things a little bit differently. So my name is Rylan O'Connell. I go by Updog on the Slack, and I am currently the president of RPI Sec. We also have Jacob, who is Fox's Nick, who is our vice president, as well as Dylan, who is sitting right next to me. Hello. Who is our treasurer. In addition, we also have Steven, who's Crux on Slack, who's our secretary, and we have two system administrators. We have Ben, who's Lambda 86, and Leland, who is Portable Television. So if you have any questions, if you're in our Slack, feel free to just ping any of us, and we should be able to answer any questions you may have. So with that out of the way, I kind of want to talk a little bit about what security is and why you might want to study it. So there's kind of two major areas of security that people talk about. There's offensive security and there's defensive security. And offensive security is the fun stuff, so that's what we do. But security is a very broad field, and there are multiple different categories there. But this offensive security that we do is basically the art of figuring out how a system works so that you can bypass that system, or you can exploit that system, or you can just make it do something that it's not supposed to do. So basically, this security that we're talking about, this offensive security especially, that's really just like another word for hacking, but it's something that you can like put on a resume because it doesn't have those negative connotations that you might if a non-technical recruiter saw that you had like hacking on your resume. So as I was alluding to earlier, this field of security, and even just this singular field of offensive security, is incredibly broad, and it kind of encompasses a whole lot of different kind of disciplines. So there's kind of reverse engineering or binary exploitation, which are very low level, taking a program apart, figuring out how it works, and then ultimately knowing it so well that you can turn around and you can use that knowledge to exploit it, and you can make it do things that even the original developers didn't necessarily know that it could do or mean for it to do. There's also web and network exploitation, which is kind of the same thing, but instead of taking this program that you've compiled, you might be looking at a website, and you might be looking at vulnerabilities in that website. There's cryptography, which may involve like designing crypto systems or designing systems that can be cryptographically secure to make sure that you have information that you can keep secret and no one else can read. There's malware analysis, there's pen testing, those kind of tie in very nicely with the reverse engineering and binary exploitation we were talking about before. And then there's kind of forensics, which is looking at what other people have done to a system and figuring out, okay, someone broke in through these techniques that we've just talked about. How did they do that? How can we figure out who it was? How can we gain evidence? And then there are kind of other categories that you may not necessarily think of or associate with traditional security. So there's something like lockpicking, like that's still security. It's not computer security necessarily, but if you have a server room and you don't know how to lock your doors properly, then those servers, no matter what firewalls, no matter what mitigations you have in place on those servers, someone can still just walk right in and steal your information. And that kind of ties in with privacy as well, which is kind of how do we take this information about us and how do we secure that information. So there's so many different disciplines, and I think that's what makes this field so interesting, because there's really something in it for everyone. And that kind of brings us to why you should do security. I find this slide very funny. But basically, the message here that we want to be relaying is that there's a lot of things, like there are a lot of things that are happening in the security community. Like every single week, I feel like you're reading about some new attack or some new breach. And so this is a really important industry. This is a really important field that that gets a lot of attention, and I think it's really exciting to kind of be on the forefront of that. But then also, and kind of, I think this is a much more interesting reason. I think this is the reason that I and a lot of other people that I know got into it, is because it's really like, it's a puzzle. Like it's constantly a puzzle. Like you're doing something that this system was not intended to do. And so every single time you're solving a problem that no one has solved before you. And that's really cool. And it exposes you to a lot of these topics that you would just never learn about because they aren't taught in the CS curriculum, because they're like so out there and so in the weeds that there's no reason that anyone should possibly need to know about this unless you need to understand the system so well that you can break it. And that kind of brings us to that last point, which is the job opportunities. Like I mentioned, this relies heavily on this knowledge that wouldn't necessarily be taught in a normal CS curriculum. And so there aren't a lot of people that have the skills necessary to do this work. And because of that, there's a huge job shortage. And so if you have these skills, then it's really easy to find a really amazing job. And that attracts a lot of people into this industry as well. And so kind of on that note of industry, there are tons and tons of companies that are hiring for these skills because, as we just discussed, they're very important. They're very critical skills. And so this slide just has a bunch of different names listed, and this is by no means like a comprehensive list of every single company or every single organization that is hiring for these skills. This is just a small list of some of the companies that we as a club have contact with. So whether that's through alumni, or if we've had people intern there, or if we just happen to know someone that works there, we have strong connections with a lot of these companies. And that's one of the things that makes RPI Sec really, really special, is these connections, because it makes the job hunt or the internship hunt a lot less daunting. And so, as I mentioned before, we are RPI Sec. We are the computer security club here on campus. And the fact that we have a club like that is actually pretty unique. There are not many clubs out there that are as established as we are. And so I think this is a really incredible opportunity because if you went to many other schools, you would not have access to, as I was talking about, those connections. You wouldn't have access to the knowledge that has been passed down through many generations. And so I think that's one of the things that makes me really excited to be going to RPI. And one of the things that drew me to this school was the club. And so as a club, we kind of have two main focuses. So the first is we want to teach about security. And we want to spread that information around to as many people as we possibly can. And so we do that through meetings, which happen on Fridays at 7 p.m., which is the one happening right now, as well as a weekly Monday meeting for introsec, which also happens at 7 p.m. Although it is worth noting that because of the holiday on Monday, we're actually going to be shifting our schedule around. So next week, we'll be having introsec on Tuesday instead of Monday. Just to make things a little bit less confusing so that we follow the academic schedule as well. And then the final thing that we do to kind of teach about security is we also try to coordinate a bunch of independent studies or undergraduate research projects. And so some of you may be familiar with MBE, or Modern Binary Exploitation. If not, that's totally fine as well. But that's a class that was recently picked up by the administration. It's a full course now. It's taught by actual professors, but that was designed by RPI Sec. We originally offered that as an independent study, and we developed the curriculum for it. And several of our alumni actually developed a lot of the labs and the homework assignments that are used in that class. And so that's kind of how we teach about security. Those are the main avenues through which we teach. But once we've learned about these topics, we like to apply them. And the way that we do that is by competing in competitions called CTFs, or Capture the Flags. And so these are security competitions, either happening at different schools, so they're just collegiate teams, or oftentimes they're actually international competitions. So everyone from around the world is invited to compete in these things. And it's really exciting because over many generations of kind of passing down knowledge and passing down skills, we've honed our skills to the point where we're actually placing within some of the top undergraduate teams in many of these competitions, which is really cool. It's very exciting to see. And so this was actually from a couple of years ago, but this is from a site called CTF Time, which basically just holds rankings for all of the different CTFs, all the different security competitions that are happening. A couple of years ago, we actually placed 8th place in the entire world, which is mind-boggling. It's so cool that as an academic team here, as a bunch of students, we're able to do something that incredible. So as I was talking about a little bit before, we do have 2 sets of meetings. So right now you're in the Friday meeting, and these happen every Friday. We try to organize them and run them purely through students. During a normal semester, we might have the occasional guest lecturer from industry, but this semester it's looking like we're going to be pretty much just student run. And then we also try to cover a lot of the introductory topics in the fall. So we try to kind of get everyone up to speed, get everyone on the same page. In the fall, we kind of try to go back to basics. And then in the spring, in these Friday meetings, we tend to dive a little bit deeper and try to explore some of the more niche topics in security. And so, like I said, these are happening at 7 p.m. We're trying to do that consistently every Friday at 7 p.m. on this YouTube channel that you're watching right now. And then the other set of meetings that we have is called introsec, which is kind of an introduction to security. And so we try to keep these very beginner friendly. We try to keep the barrier to entry as low as possible. So the expectation is that you have no prior experience. And this hopefully gives you the background that you need to kind of understand what's happening in the Friday meeting, so it's not as intimidating and it doesn't seem as complicated and as advanced. And this fall, that will also be happening at 7 p.m. Normally on Mondays, but like I mentioned earlier, it's going to be on Tuesday this upcoming week because there is the holiday on the Monday. And it's also worth noting that these usually only happen in the fall because the spring is usually when we try to dive a little bit deeper, and quite frankly, we just haven't had as much attendance in the spring. We've tried to run in the spring as well. With that, I will pass it over to Dylan to talk about CTFs a little bit more.
Yeah, so before Wyland mentioned that we compete in these competitions called CTFs, or Capture the Flag competitions. So the general idea of what they are is they are a hacking competition, where we have a bunch of security challenges, and we need to try and hack vulnerable services in order to steal different files off of the server. Typically it comes in what's called a flag, which is just a piece of text that is somewhere on the server that if we find that, we prove that we managed to solve the challenge. In many cases, you can think of it as Jeopardy, but with hacking, where they have different categories, and the higher you get in points number of the category, the harder it is, but once again, you get more points for solving it. We usually work as one team. Sometimes we have to split up just because the competition might limit, but that's typically not too much of an issue. And in terms of which ones we compete in, there are ones happening all the time. However, there are some really major ones that we like to really focus on. The first one of those is called CSAW, which is the Cybersecurity Awareness Week, which has qualifiers coming up in a week. And we will be posting more details to that in our Slack with more information to come about that later in the slideshow. So if you are interested in trying to participate, feel free to get involved. We will happily let you know when that is and how to play with us. But when I mentioned the Jeopardy, this is what I was referring to. Here you can see that there are a whole list of categories down the left-hand side of the screen with different boxes. Each of those boxes will represent one of the challenges, which once again, harder challenges will reward more points. And here you can see we have some pictures of times that we've competed in the past. This is from a few years ago where we won first place at Cybersecurity Awareness Week, not the qualifiers, the actual finals. Here was when we went to DEF CON, which is the largest security convention in the world. They also have a CTF competition every year, where we luckily got to go in person a few years ago and compete in that. And there are various prizes that you get for these. Sometimes we get a basketball signed by executives of a tech company, and then other times we might get, say, all of the money that happened to be in an ATM that day. And sometimes, if we're really lucky, we get to actually travel the world to compete. These are pictures from the real world CTF in China, where we had students actually fly out to China to compete in this one that was live in person. Unfortunately, this will likely not be happening for a little bit due to current circumstances, but hopefully that will change soon. If you want to get in touch with us, like I said, we highly encourage it. There are several ways to do it. First of all, we have our website, RPIS.ec, which will have links to a bunch of resources and information. And we also have our Slack at rpisec.slack.com. That is by far our most active communication platform. Unfortunately, at the moment, you need an RPI email address to be able to sign up. However, feel free to ask questions in there. You'll typically get a response relatively quickly. Obviously, timing depends. So in order to try and get people more familiar with the format of a CTF, we actually host our own, called Fair Game. If you want to compete in it, it is open now at fairgame.rpis.ec. And it is one that, like I said, we run, and it's designed to be a fairly intro-level CTF. There are example challenges from several different topics, so you can really try out everything and see what you like. We'll be having it running for the entire semester, and once again, if you have any questions, we want to help you learn how to solve it. We even have an entire channel on our Slack dedicated to it, so feel free to join that, ask questions whenever you need them, and hopefully you enjoy it.
One last thing I just want to point out, that Fair Game site does actually require an RPI email at this point in time, so if you're not an RPI student, unfortunately, that particular resource you won't be able to make use of.
And that is it for our presentation today.
Awesome. Thanks everyone for tuning in.